Serki, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 edition of this year. It's renamed into Canvas People Power Academy. This is our fourth attempt to reach people across the globe, bring interesting speakers, but most importantly, take a look at the pressing topics when it comes to movement building, freedom struggle across the globe. This year in particular, it will be several different things that we'll be focusing on. And as usually at the beginning, let's take a look into sessions in front of us today. We'll be talking about the challenging autocrats, but also the bottom-up reshaping of pro-democracy movements. We're having three very interesting guests, which we'll introduce shortly. We move to the most pressing issue of change from dictatorship to democracy as soon as this Thursday, June 22nd, trying to understand that in nonviolent struggle, you actually have more chance to succeed than to maintain the change. What is this thing we call transition? How do we prepare for the transition? And how we make sure the wonderful achievements that movements reach across the globe are there steadily. How we keep people involved, how we build structures where they don't exist, how we avoid having successful revolution followed with disastrous transition like in Egypt. Moving into next week, once again, the world is on fire. It's all about the women, talking about rebellious women and how the women have caught world's attention with guests ranging from democracies to fighting very, very uphill struggles in places like Iran, ending up with the idea that for whatever we do, we need money. You remember every kind of summer academy is about acquiring or focusing on one specific skills. This year, Breza will lead you through the art of the fundraising. The sessions are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They are all 9 Eastern Standard Time or 3 Central European Time, where I'm calling in here from Belgrade. So let's fast forward into what we are looking at today. The world has changed, and though we are facing the very grim trend in declining democracy in the last 15 years, mainly coming from elected democracies. I'll talk a little bit about that earlier. We're often witnessing the completely new breed of social movements. Social movements are very different animals comparing to the, well, good old times when I was running a social movement back there in late 90s. What are the specifics? What are ups? What are downs? And then taking a look into the battlefields and trying to understand why for democracy in the world, when you take a look at Iran, yes, we are fighting autocracy in Iran, but preventing one's democracies to backslide is a very important thing, which is why we are having interesting guests from Brazil and Georgia today. And also a very, very positive trend is this generational awakening, and this is why we have Domenica Lasota. More and more young generations previously engaged in climate change are joining forces with pro-democracy struggles. Is this phenomenon impacted by the war in Ukraine? And are we having a right to take a very hopeful look into democracy will soon be cool again, at least in the population which will inherit our planet? I'll start with statistics. This is how democracy looked across the last 15 years. You have blue and red. Blue is the number of the countries where democracy and freedom increased annually, comparing to the number of the countries in red where it decreased. And you can see that actually the planet is backsliding. Very interestingly, it is backsliding once again. When we take a look at the major part of this shift is happening, it is in the countries which have semi-democracy or established democracy. And this is where democracy shrink. So as important as it may be for us to empower movements that are fighting in authoritarian regimes, it may be a very interesting issue, and I'm actually working on a very interesting project with Pedro, figuring out how to defend democracy at the places where it's under assault. I mentioned Orban, Erdogan, Duterte, all of these countries where democracy is once, and this is where this index backslides. Fast forward to 2022, this is the first year in a row where we are almost equal. Does war in Ukraine served as a wake-up call for the planet. Or this is more local, a product of hard work of activists like Georgi and Pedro that are trying to prevent democracy in their countries to backslide. Taking a look into another phenomenon, which is once again, we're having people far younger than me on this call, which makes me very happy. So how these contemporary movements differ from movements in the past? Obviously, they are very horizontal. They spread like a wildfire, very often triggered by some kind of event. Remember the murder of George Floyd, very often spreading over social networks. How this shape impacts how they work. They are difficult to oppress. They are difficult to predict. They also bring a lot of ownership, and ownership in movement is a very important thing, to the different local branches. They are rarely managed by one single organization, and they tend to be leaderless. This is where the devil lies. Movements need to be led. In order to be successful, there must be some kind of consensus where we are going, what are our demands, and how we are going to bring and execute our decisions. That makes actually effectiveness of these horizontal movements statistically smaller than the movements in the past. So on one hand, we had more movements, more people engaged in movements, and huge peak in numbers, where we are looking at numbers in individual countries, where we are looking at a number of protests globally. But sometimes these movements are very difficult to formulate their goals or build organization. Remember, mobilization and organizations are two phenomena which you both need in order to exercise successful nonviolent struggle. What to make of actual successes? Many organizations focus on doom and gloom of authoritarianism, far-right populism, but I'll take a look at successes. And we have every reason to be proud on several things that are happening globally. One of them being ousting aspiring autocrat in free and fair elections within the large mobilization. Of course, it's Bolsonaro, and the country is Brazil. Another one is fighting pro-autocratic, pro-Russian government in Georgia, organized very cleverly and very smartly, both tactically and strategically, by the people and loose coalition of civic groups in Georgia. And lastly, taking a look at the global trend and how the war in Ukraine really exposed the face of the dealers of this narcotic the planet is attached with, the oil. And when we take a look at the faces of dealers, that they never look nice. They look like Putin or Khamenei or Maduro. And how this new generation is figuring out very effective strategy to tackle both issues. Because divestment from oil very often means divestment from dictators' oil. Fighting for the climate change to stop and fighting for a greener technology actually deprives dictators of their most valuable exporting asset, which then kind of diminishes their capability to pay the forces that are oppressing the population in their own countries. But I'm talking too much. You're not here to listen to me. You're actually here to listen to our amazing guests. So please let me introduce Pedro Teles, advocacy, civic engagement, and public policy expert of QUID, amazing organization that struggles against disinformation and has a very prominent role in public mobilization in Brazil. Georgi Kaladze, representative of amazing generation, which kicks butts of pro-Russian government in Georgia. And of course, Dominika Lasota, whom I won't introduce much, climate change activist, democracy activist, one of the leaders of the Fridays for Future in Eastern Europe. And when somebody asks me who Dominika is, I said, if I'm in my 20s, I would like to be Dominika Lasota. So welcome to this panel. Once again, for the audience, you're more than welcome. There's more than 200 people. All of you welcome, seeing a chat coming from all over the world. Please make sure you write the questions in chat. Because of a lot of people, we will harvest the questions. And after the introductions, I will make sure that panelists get them. Okay, we'll start with Pedro. Pedro, my friend, first of all, welcome. So glad to have somebody from Brazil on. We never had a guest from Brazil in it. Take floor, let us know about your amazing work. Let us know about how this dynamic really brought the largest individual change towards democracy in the last year. And floor is yours.
Thank you, Sergio. Thank you to Canvas and to everyone here. A pleasure to be with you. I'm Pedro. I'm from Brazil, São Paulo. I'm based in São Paulo. I'm speaking from my home right now. And my background, I've been a campaigner since undergraduate times. So I've done campaigning and advocacy forever in my life. I started on climate campaigning and in a work around inequalities. And it got to a point a few years ago where we started having a political crisis that eventually led to Bolsonaro's election in Brazil. And I just realized I had to put more time into democracy work. And that's how I started working and putting much more attention to democracy, together with loads of other activists and movements that popped up in the country and that have, in many ways, helped lead the way for Bolsonaro's eventual defeat. But it's been a long and winding road. It's been quite difficult. But still, I would say we're right now in a much better position than we were 6 months ago, while we still had Bolsonaro as a president. And I'm going to share with you, I guess, 6 key takeaways that I have here with regards to the process of having Bolsonaro as a president and the process of taking him out of presidency. I'm going to share my screen here. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Cool. All right. So first, to give you the context of Brazil over the last 4 years, Bolsonaro is the popular authoritarian leader elected in a wave of anti-politics and disinformation. This is definitely not exclusive of Brazil. Many of you here in this call are living with this in your countries or at risk of living with this in your countries. He, as the president, made unprecedented use of public money, both to secure support in Congress and to pursue re-election. People are still finding out, even though he's not president anymore, people are still finding out new ways and schemes that he used to buy support in Congress and to try to make sure he will be re-elected. Fortunately, that didn't happen. He did have support from some key economic groups who are benefiting both from his regressive economic policies and deregulation. Of course, all of these points here, most of them are definitely not exclusive of Brazil. We also had at the same time limited action by big tech companies to stop extremists and manipulators. Right now in Brazil, we're discussing in Congress a bill to regulate big tech, and big tech are still strongly resisting it and trying to avoid regulation, while we started having, at the same time in Brazil, mass shootings, which are being promoted in schools, which are being promoted on big tech platforms. So this is still an ongoing struggle. At the same time, Democrats and progressives, so this includes both political parties and social movements and NGOs, of course, were very active against Bolsonaro, but still largely stuck in kind of early 2000s strategies and tactics. So while Bolsonaro was focusing on WhatsApp and doing WhatsApp work, WhatsApp is huge in Brazil, everybody has WhatsApp on their phones, many NGOs were still using email marketing, that sort of things when it comes to online and also offline tactics. So a big part of the work that we did at Quid, the organization that I helped found in 2020, and that many others did, was kind of learning how to catch up with the extremists' capacity to do comms and engagement. And fortunately, in Brazil, we did have the judiciary system and big players in the media actively countering attacks on democracy. This is not the reality in many countries. I know there are several countries where the judiciary has already been taken over by the autocrats, or the media has already been taken over. We were fortunate in Brazil to still have these powers doing the counterdowns. Okay, now that we have the context, what are the 6 takeaways I wanted to share with you from Bolsonaro's defeat, which I wanted to discuss with you also and hear your thoughts, because I believe these are international phenomena. The first point is, it is even harder than it looks. Bolsonaro was a disaster in the pandemic, in the COVID pandemic. We had an extraordinary work of civil society. We had a candidate facing Bolsonaro in the elections, which was Lula, the current president, who before that had already been the most popular president in Brazil of all time. But still, Bolsonaro would have won if he had only 1% more votes. It was a very, very close election. So I would say that we definitely did, as a country, as democratic players in this country, the best that we could. We gave it the best shot. There was a lot of energy put into it from many different fronts, and still Bolsonaro was really close to winning the re-election. So it is even harder than it looks. The second point is you can only win if you make it the absolute priority. What we saw happen in Brazil in the last years was that many movements, many organizations, and many funders who had historically never engaged with work around democracy directly or with work around elections changed their approach to face the Bolsonaro challenge head on. And many of them took extraordinary risks, either by any like general standards like security risks and etc., or looking at the work that they had done in the past. They were venturing into new types of challenges and issues because they were willing to face this challenge. At the same time, we saw key politicians and key political parties who had never worked together, building coalitions and building alliances to face Bolsonaro. So many players, be them big players or small players, did see it as like it's now or never. We got to make everything we can make to make sure we're going to win this upcoming election. We're going to take Bolsonaro out of power. So you can only win if you really make it the absolute priority. The third key takeaway is that the strategies required for facing an autocrat that is in power especially, are very different from what we usually do in NGOs and social movements for approving bills or for trying to pressure a democratic politician. Our toolkit, our strategies, our tactics as activists, as movements, are usually focusing either on kind of changing people's minds around issues they believe in, so making people more prone to arguments around gender or around race, or against guns or about climate, etc., or mobilizing our base, making sure that people who are already on our side will be more noisy, will go to the streets, and etc. This is what helps us in a very broad manner to approve bills, to pressure democratic leaders and politicians, etc. When it comes to an autocrat that is in power, taking that person out of power is less about talking to our base and much more about talking to what you can call neutral audiences. So people that are not on your side, but are not on the autocrat side either, who are usually the majority of the population. And it's less about changing those people's minds, because changing mindsets usually takes a long time. It's a like culture wars and etc. And it's more about how do I prime in people's minds the negative aspects that they already see as negative on that autocrat. Because when you're talking about neutral citizens who are not taking a stand, they look at the autocrat and there's some things that they look at this person and say, this is good, and some things that look and say, this is bad, and it kind of balances out. How do you make sure that the negative aspects are highlighted, that they are primed in people's perception? So it's a different type of struggle. It requires different tactics and strategies from us to make sure that we're going to be advancing towards defeating the autocrat. The fourth takeaway is that communications are the key battleground, and distribution is more important than content. We tend to have comms strategies which are issue-centric. So it's about climate change, or it's about any other issue. Like it's about gender, it's about gun control, it's about what we need when we're talking about making sure an autocrat is not going to get to power or will be taken out of power is more of a people-centric approach. Capable, you have to look at different audiences, different groups of the population. Understand why are they supporting this person, or why this group is neutral about this person, and making sure you have messages that talk to these audiences and have a distribution infrastructure capable of delivering content in high volume and high frequency to these audiences. It really is about changing the way we usually see comms, and this requires usually a lot of investments, both of like either of time or money or both, ideally, both in research and polling and understanding people's views, especially people who are not close to us, and also on building this distribution infrastructure. I would say that in most countries, civil society is much more focused on content and the quality of the content than on distribution. It's time we focus on distribution because the autocrats have looked at this and they are very good at it. And of course, the most powerful narratives to counter an autocrat are the ones that can be easily adopted, remixed, and adapted by different players in civil society working online and offline, so they can spin it to bring this to their audiences. And maybe most important of all, being able to set the agenda is more important than being able to respond to the autocrat's agenda. Autocrats like Bolsonaro are very skilled at making sure that they have the public agenda under their control, that they are making the news every day. Taking them out of the news and making sure our points in the news are more important than responding to them. The fifth point, one before the last, is winning an election is not enough. So it was a major victory defeating Bolsonaro, as it was a major victory defeating Trump in the US, as in other countries where major victories have happened. But we also have to look at the conditions that allow that authoritarian leader to rise, right? And this is long-term work. This is culture wars. This takes more time and etc. But we have to have this in mind. Still, if you have a clear window of opportunity to actually directly win an election or defeat an authoritarian leader, maybe focus on this first. Like if you have an election where this authoritarian leader can be defeated, like we had in Brazil, focus on this first, and then focus on the long-term conditions struggle. But have in mind that it doesn't end when you win the election. And the sixth point and final point is that we urgently need more international cooperation and coordination to fight autocrats. Other people are facing similar challenges across the world. It's not by chance that we have 200 people here or more in this call right now. So fortunately, we are collectively already in some point connected and aligned on this goal, but we're very far from what we need in terms of cooperation and coordination. And at the same time, autocrats do have their own cooperation and coordination networks, and they're very strong. There are publicly announced events in the US every year where autocrats meet. The autocrats are Bolsonaro was flying to a few different countries ruled by autocrats right before Brazil's elections to make sure they will get their support for his re-election in the country. So we need to step up our game with regards to this as well. And I'm going to stop here. Thank you. This is my email right here, and looking forward to the conversation.
Wow, Pedro, so many great points. Thank you for this presentation. I will outline a few takeouts that we in Canvas always outline. Understanding that you need to be on the offense, which is a great point moving to Georgi from here, because they are now setting the wish to go for Georgia to EU as a main point. Also talking about how it is so important to mobilize the middle. We already have 2 or 3 questions for you in chat. Jelena will read them later, but now let's move from Brazil to Georgia and take a look at this amazing place where the dynamics have changed so much thanks to the young people. Thank you for that, and thank you for attending it. Georgia Kaladze.
Hi, everyone. To be honest, I'm a little bit nervous, but it's a great pleasure to be here and to share my experience and generally what it's like to be a student in Georgia at the moment, because I think that's the very historic moment in Georgia, since we never been this close to be the part of the Europe. We were the part of the Europe historically, but at the moment there is a real chance to join the European Union. So I just want to tell you shortly my story, what has happened and what I've been through those days, and I just want to talk you the main processes which was going there. Just to start introducing myself, as they said, I'm Georgi. I'm 22 years old, student, and studying law at the Tbilisi State University. Tbilisi is the capital of Georgia, and I almost finished my bachelor's degree, actually. Just to explain the context to start from here, I'm very proud to say that 89% of the Georgian population are actually supporting the EU integration of Georgia. But the problem is that since the more than 20% of my country is occupied by Russia, unfortunately, and the whole country is occupied by Russian government. And we are here like trying to fight the Russian government to change something for better, to show the Europe that we are people here, we are the main part, and we want Europe actually. And to explain more clearly, it's worth noting that we are waiting the answer from the European Union if we be granted the candidate status or not. And we are waiting the answer in December. And unlike the Ukraine and Moldova, we have already been rejected once, and it's all because of the actions of our government, unfortunately. Just to say a little bit about myself, I think it's very important to start from here, like from my university, since my university is the state university, and it's like the country, what's happening in this country, it's a copy here. So where my activism started actually was when the student self-governance, like the student union, has extended its terms of office illegally, unfortunately. So we held the alternative elections on my faculty of law, and now now the part of the governance which was elected on my faculty by the elections we held is now the legitimate at the whole university. So that was the first victory for me personally, which I have. And the main campaign here was that you can distance from the self-government and let it be what is now, and it's actually bad, or you can actively engage it, and you can participate to change something for better. So it was like the process which I seen at the university was like the process which now happens in Georgia, because there we have two options. We can distance like from the processes and just let my country become Russia, or we can actively engage in the processes, especially the youth. So that's what happened like those days. You know, when everything started like just to see the new process when the Russian-Ukrainian war was started. And since our government has the problem that he wasn't supportive to Ukraine, so people were outside said that, no, we are solidarity to the Ukraine and you have to support the Ukraine because the Russian is our enemy as well. And it's our enemy, first of all, since there was a war in my country like 2008. When I was 7 years old. And from this point, like there was a big protest, big demonstrations, and the youth just was the only part. We were here, but we were the part of the process. Unlike the things which happened like 2 months ago, we were not only part, we were at the head of the process, and we were in the leading part. Like it was about the so-called Russian law. My government wanted to adopt the foreign agents bill, like which means that everyone who gets the finances from the abroad, like from the West, should be declared as the agent. And it was our main victory which we had. And I just want to speak about the reasons why we won it, like the process. And it's very important because there were two things. Since the opposition in my country is very weak, unfortunately, and they are not trustful, like people don't trust the opposition. And as I have said that the Gen Z, the youth were the lead of the protests, everyone trusted us. They see that we are the hope of the future. And if they say that, oh, I don't want to stand next to some politicians from the opposition, I will stand like the people, I will stand next to the youth. So that was the first point. And the second one was that and as Pedro said about the communication, it was the main thing here. When the government said us that we want to adopt the law, they said that the NGOs are not transparent, and that's the problem, and we just want to make it more clear. But we said it's not about the NGOs, or it's not about the transparency. It's about the Russian in the Europe, because it's a Russian law. So that was the main point here, that we see the transparency is not a problem. Here the problem is where are we going now in the future, and what's our choice? And we started like it was the very historic moment. When I was standing there, I feel the power that, oh, we are here, we all are here, and now the Gen Z are in the lead, and Gen Z has arrived, and now we can be like very optimistic to the future. But that wasn't an ending point, since maybe we won the battle, but not the war, and everything continues now. Since I have said that in December, we will know the answer if we join the EU or not. And there, the government are trying to prevent us from joining the EU. Since Russia has canceled the visa regime, like the 1 month ago, and very unfortunately, and it's like the direct flights between the Moscow and the Tbilisi has been restored. And there was the one very bad action where the Lavrov's daughter has the wedding in Vareli. Vareli is the part in Kakheti, like in Georgia. So that's like the narrative of our government wants. They are doing everything to stop us from joining the EU. And the main thing is that if you ask my government who is the main villain from there, it was the opposition. But now it's the youth. And unfortunately, like 3 or 5 days ago, they beat one of the students who were protesting the lectures. It was actually at my faculty, at my university, and there was the student who was protesting the lectures which were held by one of the leaders of the ruling party, Georgian Dream. That's the party which rules my country now, and they beat us. So their politics now is they want the youth to to scare us and to say that no, you don't have the power and just stop. But we are the people who see the the main victory here, which was about the Russian law, and we aren't going to stop. And we are going to continue, since we are waiting to say about a little bit more our future plans. We're waiting to December, and it depends on the answer. We will get the candidate status or not. If we get, we want to show everyone that it's on our behalf, on the people, and not the government. And if we don't get it, we have to take the very great action, or just to do the unprecedented things, because we will be very near to the Russia, unfortunately. So I'll be here and glad to answer all of the questions, which is thanks a lot.
Thank you, Georgi, for this amazing thing. One correlation between what you and Pedro were talking is that you actually need multiple fronts, and you normally very often lack one front. So in Brazil, you have a capable political opposition, but you need to mobilize people outside of the opposition, where in Georgia, the heavy lifting is done by the movement not affiliated with the party. But Monday you will face the elections, and you will need a credible political alternative. You need somebody on the ballot that people can vote for, despite of the fact how Georgian Dream by that moment will be super unpopular. Now to the very different terrain, and probably most important thing that you mentioned, moving to Dominica and the role of Generation Z. What we can expect in the future, what we have seen in the past, is Generation Z being more concerned about the climate change than my generation, which is of course why we all screw up the planet for you young people, and you need to live there longer than we do. But now we see growing connection between feeling that something needs to be done about the environment, connection to the fossil fuels, and the war in Ukraine, and the fact that we have all of these lovely dictators living out of the oil revenue. So where you are now, what you are doing, what are you planning, how the world looks from a perspective of a leading climate change activist in Eastern Europe?
Hi, everyone. I'll just share my screen with you because I love pictures, and I just want to show you a little bit so that we can, so that the work becomes clearer. Can you see it? Okay. So I'll just share my screen. Cool. Okay, so hi everyone again. My name is Dominika. I'm a 21-year-old climate activist from Poland, and I originally started all of my work, as Sergio mentioned, in the field of climate. And so I wanted to start with the climate because this is the picture of Fridays for Future, one of our strikes from from before the war, as I remember. And obviously Fridays for Future, you may have heard about it, the movement initiated by Greta Thunberg that moved millions of young people across the whole world to demand climate action from our governments. This is where I started, and this is what was my origin of my activism. We used to fight for the future, but then the 24th of February happened. And so the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and as a person living in Poland, bordering with Ukraine, for me, that day changed everything almost, because on that day, sort of, fighting and campaigning for future, for climate action became, the last thing I was thinking of. The main thing that I was thinking of is that my friends in Ukraine have been running away from their houses, seeking shelter, and that we need to organize evacuation for them. And so it felt like the most bizarre and terrifying experience for me ever. But I'm bringing this up because that was what I think really shifted things within our movement, within Fridays for Future, and within the climate movement in general. Because on that day, suddenly, when everything had to shift to the very present, when we had to focus on the fact that the bombs are falling, we started thinking, okay, we have two options. And I, living in Warsaw, I was like, okay, I have two options. One option is that I put my work in the climate aside for a moment and I run to the train station to help in making sandwiches for the people who were arriving from Ukraine, the refugees. That was one option, very good one. And I thought that, okay, maybe I should run there. Or I was like, okay, if we, as climate activists, we know that the climate crisis has been funded by fossil fuels, and it has been done by politicians who stand on the side of businesses rather than on the side of us. And they, do lovely PR and speak about, they give us promises, but then they don't commit to it. Then let's perhaps check if the same thing isn't happening with the Russian invasion. Let's check the roots of this problem. And so in the very few days, this is what we did. We checked, obviously, so how this whole horror was possible. And it became very clear to us that without the fossil fuel money that is the fundament of Russian economy, without the money that's being sent from Europe to Putin, as well to many dictators, but to Putin in that case, this whole horror wouldn't be possible. And so the second option became very clear to me, that instead of going and doing sandwiches and helping, just alleviate the small effects of some of the effects of this crisis, I will pursue the political path. So we will call and do everything we can for the politicians to make better decisions that they have been doing for the past decades. And so this is essentially what we started doing. And we started linking the climate with the war, because we realized that the two of these have the same root, and that is the fossil fuel industry and the money and the political, the political machine that supports it, that fuels from it, that benefits from it, and that is then leading to all sorts of crises. And this is where the embargo movement kind of erupted for us, and we've been leading protests and organizing protests across Europe. This is a really lovely picture from some of the earliest strikes that we did in Warsaw with the Ukrainian diaspora, with the climate, kind of all of those different communities kind of together. And the banner that you can see here, it means stop financing wars, because this is essentially what we realized was happening, that this war didn't fall from the sky, that it was a direct effect of the system that we have been living, a system that was supported by European governments who on one day speak about democracy and world peace, and on the other they sit at the tables with dictators and they sign the deals for new gas and oil investments. And from that, the whole movement kind of, we just took, I feel like this is the evolution of the climate movement really, was the linking with the democracy fight, was the linking with the kind of anti-autocracy fight that has been going on since last year up until now. Here you can see a picture, because one of the tactics that we very early on kind of took was to go to, literally in groups of us, we would go to all those European decision-making spaces, like to Brussels when there was the emergency European Council meeting. we would go there and we would demand the embargo. So every time the leaders would meet about, solidarity with Ukraine and support for Ukraine, we would be asking them essentially through social media, through media interviews, through protests, different sorts of actions, why are you still sending Putin the money? If you speak about the war and you want to be solidarity with Ukraine, stop sending the money because you still do that. It worked at some points. At some points, we were recognized by those in power. This is Ursula von der Leyen, who very, very early on said that yes, she agrees with us that Europe needs to, as you can see, get rid of fossil fuels. So it seemed like she really understands what we're talking about. But unfortunately, again, this fight is still ongoing, because even though they speak and they say that they understand, then we see all sorts of deals that they continue to make. And this is why we have to repeat the message, but also we have to call for a broader, just green transition, so that those fossil fuels and those dictators become just completely useless to us. And that's obviously a more complicated thing, but I guess this is the thing that, and I'm going to chat about it in a second, that that allows us to build different alliances and allows us to link with other social movements. On tactics, this is something that we have, and this is, I think, one of the greatest tactics of the climate movement that we have been able to develop and work very successfully with, is confronting politicians, is really kind of destroying those, like this political theater that they put up, that they think, this is going to work and it's going to get them more support and so on. We try to break them whenever we can. So this is an example of, there was a youth conference in Strasbourg in European Parliament. And after Emmanuel Macron's speech, he thought that we're coming for pictures. And instead we went on the stage near him. And instead of taking selfies with him, we started asking him, why is he still supporting the fossil fuel companies? Why is he allowing for all of those investments that destroy human life everywhere across the planet? He wasn't that happy. You can see his face. He turned from smiling to being a bit angry at us. And this is what we do. And the most important thing is that we spread those tactics and get other young people to kind of empower them and do the same thing. So, I've been doing those things. Here is the president of Poland. That got him a bit, he got a bit ashamed by the whole Poland when he wasn't able to answer our questions. But there are other young people that, with a little bit of courage, with some questions, they go into those places and they destroy that political theater. And then we are able to tell different stories about just transition, about embargo, and so on, based on that. Speaking of just transition, so obviously we need to transition our economies and put them on the green path so that those fossil fuels and those dictators will not be needed for us. And so we try to link those different, as I said, sectors here, calling for the expansion of renewables, saying that renewables is the energy of peace, saying that, renewables are the exact opposite of like centralized economy energies that are in the hands of dictators. And the past few months have been really, I could speak about it for hours, but just wanted to bring this in. I think realizing the connections between those different crises and also realizing that those crises may have similar solutions also opened us up to some unexpected alliances. And here, at the very end of last year, we were able to finally get a kind of like the first connection with the miners, with the mining trade unionists, which was absolutely unthinkable in Poland. And ever since, we've been in touch with them, and we've been kind of uncovering and exploring ways in which we can advocate for our government to fully change, our economy away from fossil fuels. So again, we can create a system that's for the people and for the planet. This is our community. We are building now in Eastern Europe a community of Wschód, which means both the sunrise and the east. So we think of ourselves as the sunrise from the east. So kind of like erupting in the face of such horror that those dictators kind of threw on us, we're able to, bring the sunrise, bring the change that can hopefully shake up the whole European politics. And just to finish up, this is the picture from Egypt, because we believe that the story that we are carrying is a story that resonates with people across the globe, especially with people in the global south who have been, affected and who have been fighting autocrats, dictators, and have been knowing that impact of those fossil fuel industries since decades. I, as a 21-year-old, explore it now and get to know all of these facts now, but I believe that just as we were able to build alliances in Poland, just as we are building alliances across Europe, we're able to build those like global north, global south alliances with people who, as here in Egypt, are very familiar with the Egyptian dictatorship and how it also benefits from gas. But I believe that this is, a story that has no end and it's just beginning. But as you said, there's something that connects us is, stop fueling wars, stop fueling crises. Like this is the kind of message that I feel like is what we all here hopefully can resonate.
Amazing on so many different fronts, from understanding unexpected alliances, which we often have to make with different people, all the way to running something which is exactly drops in a category of, this horizontal movements, because obviously that's not one country war or one village war. This is a battle you wage across the regions. Thanks to all three of you, impressive presentations. And let's move to the questions. Yellow, I see several of them coming for Pedro. So if you can read them in a bulk, and then he can try to answer them. And then we move to Georgi, and then we move to Dominika.
Yes, so I tried to gather questions who are most commonly been asked, and a lot of them are about propaganda and also about the unity. So basically, questions are revolving around how did you manage to escape and overcome Bolsonaro's divisive propaganda and manage to unite people? And also, how were you able to spread your message when autocrat has such a huge control of the media?
Good. So be very brief. How to go around Bolsonaro's propaganda? I guess there are two key things here. Thing number one is, in Brazil, we still have elections that work. Therefore, we didn't need to talk to the whole country. We needed to talk to the amount of people required to defeat him in the palace, right? Once the clearer your audience is, the easier it is to talk to them and to move them. So what most effective organizations and movements did in Brazil was, who are the folks that we can talk to, and that if we move to become more active against Bolsonaro or to vote against Bolsonaro, etc., is going to be enough for us to make a change. So there was a very, very conscious and clear decisions on where to put our energy and where not to. For example, trying to convince a hardcore supporter of Bolsonaro that Bolsonaro is not a nice guy, the amount of time and energy that's going to take is going to be 10 times what you need or 100 times what you need to talk to an average citizen that Bolsonaro is not a nice guy. So look at what's the right audience and etc. And the second thing, it's connected to what Sergio highlighted on, we got to be in the offensive. So it's very clear to me and to many of us and to many academics already, etc., that efforts like fact checking, it doesn't work. For many reasons, I'm not going to go into detailing now, but like to a large extent, it doesn't work. What you need to build is build comms capacity capable of disputing the headlines, capable of being as loud and as attractive and interesting as the news that the autocrat and their groups are trying to put it out. So it's a mix of effective campaigning and messaging with distribution infrastructure. Like, we got to learn how to do WhatsApp. We got to learn how to do better online media. We got to learn how to coordinate among different movements and etc. to spread a message. That sort of things. So I guess in a nutshell, and being mindful that I have 10 minutes and more questions, I would say I would highlight these few points.
Thank you, Pedro. Sergey, do you want to move to Georgi's question? Yes.
You are muted.
Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, let's move to the second round to know something that Pedro, then Georgi can address.
Georgi, we have a really specific question for you. So what do you think civil resistance can do against oligarchization, which is one of the key problems on Georgia's path to the EU? Georgia's path to the EU is a really big news these days. So please go ahead.
I'm actually very happy for this question, because one of the things that Georgi was very modest in explaining, that unlike places like Brazil, where Bolsonaro has his oligarchs, in Georgia, it is the oligarchs having the ruling party. So the level of ownership is a little bit different. So how do you deal with that, Georgi?
Thanks for the question as well, since I want to speak about more for the future plans. We have the elections next year, and I think the best way to change something here and just to fight with the oligarch is the way to change something here. Unfortunately, the election threshold remains 5%, which is quite a big, but we are a small country, you know, the population is like 3.5 million here. And the great thing here is that the young people that we also see them as a hope of the future are getting older, and they can vote. As time goes, the more young people are getting the right to vote, the possibility to vote. So as my role, and I think the role of the civic movements in Georgia are main thing to convince everyone to go to vote. And the another thing is that we have the small parties in the opposition, which unfortunately at this moment they don't want to be united and just to stand together. But I believe there is a chance to convince them that they have to be together, like to unite the voters and beat the threshold.
So once again, like in Serbia in 2000,
Yeah.
you will need to squeeze some hands to persuade the opposition that it's in their own interest to run united. Good luck with that. I must tell you that in many countries that Canvas worked with, it is kind of a very complicated and frustrating but necessary process. So thumbs up for them. Something for Dominika. I've seen questions popping up, Yellow.
Yes, there are a lot of questions. Again, a lot of them are revolving around unity. And for Pedro and for Dominika and also for Georgi. But now, Dominika, there is one question. Again, I'm going to focus on the unity here, and that is what other issues do you believe can be unifying across nation now when we're talking about Generation Z? Not only climate, but what do you believe could connect Gen Z? We are talking about people facing authoritarian efforts even in the all democracies, about gender and sexuality and so on, as we can see in the US. So Gen Z opposes these efforts by large percentages, and we feel they are more powerful. What do you think could be those questions that could unite Gen Z across the world?
Well, I do think that this is something that we are trying to work really hard on here in Poland, is that we are seeing, obviously the past years has shown us that there are many different movements that can become very active very fast. And that has been, for Poland, it's been, first of all, the women's movements, the women's rights movements. We've seen like millions of women turning up to the streets when the abortion was banned. And this is like a massive power base that for now is largely demotivated to be active again, mainly because we are seeing that with our right-wing government, it is impossible to pursue and to progress on women's rights and on abortion access. But there is this power base that kind of is there and is ready to be activated. Similar thing that we're seeing that across Europe, and especially during the cost of living crisis, that there have been trade unions that have become, active because the governments have, in times of crisis, they have gone against, either that is, providing fair wages for essential jobs, and so the trade unions fight back. Or we have seen, some really with, the end of capitalism, hopefully comes the fact that workers are treated very, very wrong. And so we are seeing that there is this potential power base of workers that within trade unions or beyond that are they are affected by the current crisis, and they sense that things are wrong, but sometimes they are not active enough, or they do not have the right support, political representation to fight for a broader agenda. And so I guess I feel like I cannot really tell what's going to be the next big thing out there, because the climate was a big thing for some years. But I do believe that for me, the priority right now is building a kind of cross cross-struggle movement. So linking, seeing the connections that we can have with the women's rights movement, with the queer rights movements, with the workers' movements, because kind of the broader of our base, the more power we have in setting the agenda, and then kind of, be that raising the support for opposition, as in Poland, or countering some of the attacks that the government has on us. So I think that this is the way to go, I would honestly say. Some of the amazing work that I've seen, be that for instance, in the in the UK, again, we're seeing climate movement linking more with healthcare workers, with public transport workers, with energy sector workers. And I think this is in France, you could see with the pension reform. It was the climate movement, the pension reform movement, and the trade unions that joined forces, and they were able to paralyze France and French government for a long time. And kind of this is what gets me excited, and this is what I am looking towards.
Thank you, Dominika.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. There is super interesting question about responsibility. It is clear that leaderless movements can be effective in terms of inclusion and decentralized organization. But in terms of taking responsibility for actions and demands, can that be a problem? For example, there could be multiple demands and ideologies that could undermine the solidarity of social movement, or do you not think so? So again, we have the unity question in kind of involved around that.
To jump into it, this is exactly, and that probably would be the good last question, if you can take one quick take, because you are coming from very diffuse movement. How we solve this dilemma between horizontality, ownership, and we all have the voice in this, into what do we really want to achieve? Are we moving in the right direction? If we need to change direction, how to change it, and how to deal with a group that shares our values and our commitment to the struggle, but they just decide one day they want to throw Molotovs. One last round, Pedro, Georgi, and then Dominika. And then we wrap up. I promise this will only be longer than an hour.
I mean, focusing on the leadership question. The one reason why there are a lot of problems with Lula. Lula is a political person and a leader, and etc. We would not have defeated Bolsonaro if we hadn't Lula coming on the race. And Lula is a historic leader of a social movement. Like he comes from the workers, labor unions. That's his beginnings. That's where he started. And of course, he became a party leader and then president. So he moved somewhere else. But his origins come from social movements and from a very clear leadership presence in a social movement. I would say that looking at our recent history, I am very supportive of horizontal movements and leaderless movements, and they have their role. But right now, the challenge we're facing, I think it's not enough. I think we need both things. I think we need both the leaderless and the role they play, but we also need some potential leaders sticking out to take the lead in positions like elections and contexts like that require face to be out there. That's what I'm saying.
Before move to Georgi, a question that popped up in the chat. Technology boosts horizontality in a way and bottom-up approach. Are you aware of any attempt to make this technology more in direction of making decisions for people, like really following the organization and, building up this type of online, aside of just disseminating, but kind of really making this integrative process?
So you are asking me.
My question is first for Pedro, because he's more techie than anybody on this call, I can guarantee you.
I think a lot of it's a mix of things. We do need money, right? We do need, and this is also a call for funders. Like the level of the amount of resourcing that autocrats have on their side to put on media, to put on tech is just outstanding. The type of funding that autocrats are getting, and not also NGOs and movements supporting autocrats are getting, it's a larger amount, and it's a freer amount than what traditional progressive foundations give. So there's the side of it which is like we do the investments, but there's also a side of it which is we as movements and organizations, we have to understand that the way comms happens and engagement happens changed. And we have to look at the new tools, and we have to put time and energy. When we built Quid, the organization that I am now a director of, we said we need to put 100% of time in learning how to use WhatsApp properly. And there's amazing ways to use WhatsApp for free. It's a free tool. If you build engagement techniques and capacity with only like human resources that can be volunteers or like your staff, it's enough to go very far. If you also have money, it's even better. So it's a mix of like, we need to push for more and better investments from people who are supporting NGOs and movements, but we also need to put much more time and attention, in our time and attention, into understanding that these are the tools that we have to be working on. It's not email marketing, it's not offline work. Yeah.
Georgi, off to you. Getting with unusual allies, spreading horizontally, running this vast coalition, reaching to new people. How do you manage this in Georgia?
Here the thing is, when we say that there are the youth, there are the students, we use the one word to like just to explain better the context here. We use the youth or Gen Z, but just to see it more specifically, there are like the maybe 5 or 6 very famous students movements who are working in Georgia, and maybe we have the different views and about some issues, but when it's the time we all stand together, like we are the example, like for the opposition or for the population, that's the time to stand together. Since we are like divided into different universities, and we have like the big demonstrations maybe near our universities, and we have the one point where we all unite and go like in front of the parliament together, just to see everyone that we are here together. So the main thing here is that when, as I have said, it's not a big country, and that's like the plus for us. It's like 3.5 million. And here the point is that it's very easy to spread the information because everyone knows everything. And where there are the students, maybe at the university, some of the students we're going to the lectures and said that now it's not the time now to be here. We have to stand outside. And they were joining us, and there was the main thing here. And another thing I want to just to see as myself, it was about the social media platforms. I've started like the YouTube show, which I'm the host, like it's a talk show about the student activism. Because the problem now here in Georgia is there is not a like free platform where the students can speak whatever they want. And like I've started the thing where the students can come here, like the youth, and spread the information or the things which they have. So I think that's the just to see shortly the view here.
Dominika, last round for you. We are over exceeding our time, but I really want to know how such a diverse group, it's like unlike Georgia, Poland is a big country, and then Eastern Europe is a little bit bigger than Poland. And then the world is a very big place. How do you decide what has the priority, like persuading Macron to divest from fossil fuels versus, fighting against the evil environmental project in place like Philippines, which tends to be one of the deadliest places for being environmental activists in the world?
Well, honestly, for us, when we decide, we don't decide on like, I think, how to say it? Okay, so perhaps we all decide on like the bigger time frame, the bigger story that we are, fighting against. So last year it was mainly the embargo and really doing everything in the face of the war. For me this year, we have this big kind of umbrella of the Polish general elections, to which we're trying to kind of like target and align and channel all of our actions, and then analyze like what could be like the strategic. So for instance, tomorrow we're going to target the main fossil fuel company of Poland because it gives the money to the party right now, and so it helps the current government to win again. So we're kind of like we consult, and we kind of intuitively figure out the broader direction, but then we analyze what is the strategic sub-targets, which I think has been going pretty well. Sometimes we just use opportunities that are there. You know, when those events like the Europe Youth Conference happens, it's not that, you know, I plan, sometimes I get the information that some potential opportunity to break that political theater happens in 2 days, and we just drop everything and we try it out just so that we can, you know, experiment and test different things. And I just had one more thought to what Pedro and Georgie said. Coming from the climate movement, you know that for a long time it was Greta Thunberg that was the most visible face, and we within the movement, I think, came to realize that there is a massive value in having a specific face and specific person or people kind of carrying that story that we all represent. So this is very necessary, but I think the strategic thing is that we try all the time to ensure there are many people that we build and support different people in coming to represent us, so that when the person falls sick or when the government targets specifically one of the leaders, it cannot break the whole movement. Like, we have to be strategic. We have to go kind of above the ego and acknowledge that, okay, there are some people who do it well. They just need to speak to the media to bring masses to us. But then that we need to disperse and divide the roles, the different tasks, so that, you know, when 14-year-olds come to our movement, we say, okay, there is a superpower that you can have, a super role that you can have, and you can lead on it. Then they get excited and the thing kind of like, you know, it becomes a machine, and the machine is what we are building.
We certainly need to build more machines. Here we are with the last round, one sentence round. If there is one thing you will call people to pay attention to, or follow, or sign, or, you know, donate 50 cents to, what is your call to action? Quick, Brazil, Pedro.
Call to action is, don't believe that because Bolsonaro got defeated that we won. That's it. We got to continue working against autocrats in Brazil and across the world. Hard.
Thank you for that, Georgi.
The power to change something is inside you. And if you can change yourself, you can change the environment you are living. That's the point.
Amazing takeout. Dominika, famous last words.
I would say, don't let the fascists make you hopeless. I think hope is, we build the hope. And if the fascist parties are on the rise, it doesn't matter. Like, we just need to keep going against everything, because, you know, what we are trying to build is much more precious than what they are trying to semi-build or destroy. So yeah, just not get down by the fascists, because there are still people out there that are good and need leadership in this time.
Okay, with that notion, I will first give you all the large round of applause. Thank you, Dominika, Georgi, Pedro. Thank you for doing this. Thank you all for participating. It's about 200 people who stayed till the end, which is kind of amazing. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you for being active in the chat. Thank you for sharing link. This is also an attempt of Canvas to boost this peer-to-peer learning, as we strongly believe that activists can learn a lot from each other. Once again, stay tuned in for our next session. It's on Thursday, same time, same place. You're registered to link. We're looking into why, as Georgi says and Pedro says, winning against the autocrats is only one step in this kind of establishing a long-term democracy is the place where we really want to be. Follow us on Twitter, and let's continue this journey together. Thank you for being part of Canvas People Power Academy. Hug to you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
And thank you, Jelena, for managing this very complicated group of crazy people.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you so much. Have a great day.
Bye, bye, bye.
Thursday, guys. See you on Thursday. Bye.
Bye.